All right, ladies and gentlemen. So we got a post here from Smash JT talking about Assassin's Creed Shadows. And the reason why I'm doing a video on this is because it brings up an interesting conversation from all particular sides that I kind of wanted to explore here and kind of give my 2 cents on. Now, I originally was going to write this on Smash JT's thread, but unfortunately, after 10 minutes of typing up a response, Google decided to crash on me right before I could hit enter. So I decided to do it live and make a video about it and talk about it here. So Smash JT ends up quote tweeting this particular tweet that we're going to read right now, which says, from Geralt of Gunia, Assassin's Creed Shadows is the lowest selling game of the last 5 Assassin's Creed games, despite having the highest budget. Turns out people don't want to play as Johnny Somali, which, by the way, that is absolutely hilarious. So props to Geralt of Gunia. And he's showcasing a screenshot here that I'm assuming is from Reddit. It says r/Kotaku in action. And it says the following. Assassin's Creed Shadows is the lowest selling game of the last 5 Assassin's Creed games, despite having the highest budget. I knew it was a flop, but I didn't expect it to be such a disaster. For example, compared to Mirage, which sold 5 million in 3 months, Shadows only sold 4 million in 6 months. Fewer copies in double the amount of time. Knowing that Mirage sold less than Valhalla, Odyssey, and Origins, what a real disaster. And then he ended up linking a bunch of sources showcasing information that is relevant to that particular claim. Now, okay, now that we know this, and again, I'm going to go back to this. I just want to kind of go to Smash JT's post right now. So Smash JT post says the following. When I brought up this to Colin Moriarty, which if you didn't see that debate between Colin Moriarty, you should go watch it. It's absolutely hilarious. He used it as an opportunity to claim Assassin's Creed Shadows was a roaring success for Ubisoft. And again, I've never thought Assassin's Creed Shadows was a roaring success for Ubisoft. I think it was pretty clear that it needed to be a roaring success for Ubisoft. Otherwise, Ubisoft was going to end up being sold to somebody or end up striking a deal with somebody to save the company. This was claims that I personally made before we even knew about them selling to Tencent, right? We didn't even know that was a thing. And I was saying, if this game does not knock it out the park, and I'm talking about really knock it out the park, and this is not knocking it out the park. If it doesn't do that, then unfortunately it looks like the company's going to have to sell or be saved or something along those lines, because they were basically on their dying breath. So he says the following. Again, people say he won the argument. No, he spoke with authority and constantly talked over me. That didn't make him right. Here's what Matt Piscatella said from Circle Jerk Research had to say about it at launch. Why can't you do things like this in your debates, man? Circle Jerk Research is a great line. You need to use these, man. Anyway, Matt Piscatella says the following. Assassin's Creed Shadows, by the way, I remember this because I made a video on this. Assassin's Creed Shadows was the best-selling title in March, instantly becoming the number 2 best-selling game of 2025 to date. Assassin's Creed Shadows finished the month ranked number 1 in full game dollar sales on Xbox platforms and number 2 on both PlayStation and Steam. Okay. This is why people have a problem with the way Matt Piscatella represents things, okay? I'm not going to go into the whole conversation about Circana. You could think what you want to think about this. I know for a fact that they are just purposefully misrepresenting things. That is not the same as the information being inaccurate. That is not the same. I want to make it very clear for the people who are retarded who will make these claims. That is not the same. Misrepresentation is not the same as being incorrect data, okay? It is in my belief that Matt Piscatella absolutely misrepresents things for the betterment of his company and for the betterment of his partners. That's in my opinion. Now, the reason why I say this is because, well, let me show you. If you look here again, the only numbers that we have for sure is coming from Steam. And I know, Steam is not the only numbers. I know it's the biggest cope in the world that people say all the time. Steam's not the only numbers. I get it. 64,825 concurrent players 7 months ago. Okay, with an estimated sales anywhere between 800,000 to 900,000. Chances are it's probably somewhere in the middle, so you can take about 850,000. Now, normally what I do with these numbers is I take the middle number and I double it for console, but you have to do it a little bit more because obviously it's multi-plat. So you got PlayStation and you got Xbox. Now, the reason why I say that it's misrepresentation is because, well, he decided to say and make sure that he said that Assassin's Creed Shadows finished the month ranked first in full game dollar sales on Xbox platforms. Of course it did. Why? Because there was nothing else that was even remotely close, man. Xbox players are trained to not buy video games, right? So all it takes is a few copies sold for Assassin's Creed Shadows at the price that they were asking, which was $70 to $100 or whatever the hell the fucking digital deluxe edition was. You're talking about, of course, they're going to be the number one on Xbox when there's nothing else that is available that people will remotely buy. And if they would, it's on Game Pass anyway. That's just number one. Number two, being second on both PlayStation and Steam. Well, that made me think. I thought back to a time of March of this year, and I said, Mr. Hypnotic, what games came out in March? What massively competitive games came out in March that would try to take down Assassin's Creed Shadows? I'm sure there is a lot of them, right? I'm sure there is a ton of video games that could have competed against Assassin's Creed Shadows in March. No. No, it didn't. If you go over here on Game Informer, we have the entire list of releases for March of 2025. You know what games that could even come close to competing, but obviously wouldn't against a game that has a franchise legacy like Assassin's Creed Shadows? Split Fiction is one of them. That game is cheaper, much cheaper, and it's not even close to having the same legacy as Assassin's Creed. What the fuck is Fragpunk? Fragpunk is a free-to-play FPS game. Age of Mythology, Knights in Tight Spaces, Merchants of Roswell. Bro, none of this stuff. Suikoden? Yeah, Suikoden is great, but it's not going to come anywhere close to Assassin's Creed numbers. Rise of Ronin, people thought that was a pretty average mid-game, and they basically gave that up. So what else is here that this game could have gone against? What else is here? Nothing. Nothing at all. Assassin's Creed Shadow, what? Bleach Rebirth of Souls? Bleach is not going to come anywhere close to an Assassin's Creed game. Of course not. Xenoblade Chronicles X Definitive Edition? Okay, that's great, but we all know that they don't use digital data, right? Matt Piscatella does not use digital data for their list when they talk about these things from Nintendo. They don't include Nintendo digital data, so naturally this game that could potentially compete, right? Or Atelier Yumiya could also compete. These games don't give you digital data from Nintendo. So you're not going to see. It's not going to. That is why this happens. I hope people understand. This is what I mean by misrepresentation of the number. Because to be quite frank, at AI Limit, I played this game, by the way, amazing game, was not going to come anywhere close to competing. Atomfall, amazing game, was not going to come anywhere close to competing, flat out, right? First Berserker Kazan, amazing game, not going to come close to competing because it's just not the same kind of mass market. It's not even close. So with all these games that it had to compete against, these games are not competition. None of these games are competition. Even if you go into the next month, in April, what? South of Midnight is the competition? Of course not, bro. Last of Us Part 2 remastered for like the 50th time? Bro, these games are not competition to a brand new released Assassin's Creed game. So it is not shocking that this game was the number one in dollar sales. And that brings me to my second point. And this is where I say misrepresentation is not the same as false information, okay? Matt Piscatella and Circana, they don't report on copies sold. I want to be very clear about that. They don't report on copies sold. If they do, I haven't heard of it, okay? Every time they always talk about something controversial, it is almost always in dollar sales. The reason why is because if you can report in dollar sales, that is going to heavily favor the AAA video games over anything else, right? So nobody wants to look at this game getting felted by games like Schedule 1 or something like that, right? Games that sell millions upon millions upon millions upon millions of copies. They don't ever want to bring that up because, quite frankly, those games are so cheap that even though it blew these games out the water in terms of copies sold, they obviously made less dollar sales, so they don't rank as high, right? Compared to a game that has anywhere between $70 to $120 editions, these games are going to rank very high very quickly on dollar sale metrics, which is why these games, even though they are selling less than their entire lineage of video games and their entire predecessors, it doesn't matter because the games are always going to rank higher due to how much they cost. So all it takes is a few, you could say 1 million to 2 million copies for Assassin's Creed Shadows to easily be at the top spot when compared to other games that it's competing against, which, by the way, are not that great. The only game that Assassin's Creed Shadows lost to was the one game that was both AAA and selling like hotcakes, and that was Monster Hunter Wilds, okay? Monster Hunter Wilds was a number one spot for almost the entirety of the year. I still think it is, if I'm not mistaken. It is a massive difference between the two, which is why Shadows could never compete. But of course, Shadows is going to be able to beat the other games that came out around this time because they're all fucking either trash or they're indie games that don't cost as much and they don't have as built-in as of a fan base. So this is why I say misrepresentation is a bigger problem than the, I guess, wrong information. I don't think their information is wrong. I think they know what the information is and they misrepresented to the best possible light that they possibly can showcase to everybody involved, including themselves and their partners that work at these studios. It's very important for their business model to ensure that their information is deemed not only accurate, but also is going to make the companies that they work with and for look as good as possible. That is all, again, my opinion about all this stuff. Now, Smash AT is arguing from the point of, I think, copies sold, where if you look at that, then yes, that is what this is saying, right? This is saying that Assassin's Creed Shadows sold less copies than every single game before it. And that's obvious, right? Which is why when it came to Ubisoft was trying to advertise the game as holding up firm or pretty close to what Valhalla brought in dollar revenue, because the games cost more. So naturally, it's going to be able to catch up easier to what the older games that cost less were able to do with more copies, right? So this is the narrative that they were pushing. But this particular quote tweet is about copies sold and not about dollar amounts. So when we quote tweet this, we got to make sure we specify the difference between the two. I understand Smash has a hard on right now for Colin and Matt Piscatella as well, but what he's quote tweeting is not the same thing. Like what he's saying versus the quote tweet is not the same thing. But I understand what he is trying to say. Yes, there is absolutely a misrepresentation happening from Matt Piscatella. I think you're insane if you don't see it otherwise. This person clearly is for the industry, by the industry, and he's going to make sure that the industry looks as good as possible because that affects his pocket too. This guy doesn't care about the indie developers. This guy cares about the AAA studios. It's pretty fucking obvious. So does everybody else who is being a shill right now on Twitter. They all care about AAA. They don't care about indie. So that is why when I'm looking at these numbers about Assassin's Creed Shadows, I immediately looked at the list to see if there was any video games that could even remotely compete with Shadows in terms of franchise legacy and potential mainstream success, and there weren't any. There was no games. And then the only games that could were Nintendo games that Circana has openly admitted that they ignore. So if they ignore the digital numbers because they don't get it from Nintendo, then this whole tweet right here about Assassin's Creed being the #1 full, game on Xbox or whatever, none of this matters, bro, because again, you're not even bringing in Nintendo. You're not even bringing in Nintendo, so you can't say this game is #1 in the year. I understand you specified for platforms, but we all know what you're trying to do. We all know what you're trying to do by saying that it is the best-selling game, #2 best-selling game of 2025 year to date. You started with that, and then you ended with 2 different platforms, but you left out Nintendo because you don't have Nintendo's numbers. That's the whole reason why I call this a misrepresentation. So you guys let me know in the comments down below of this video. What do you think about this particular tweet? What do you think about the quote tweet from Smash JT here talking about the copy sold? I think it was pretty obvious that the game did less than every other game. Although I can't believe that it's actually like every other game. But still, let me know in the comments down below. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. And if you enjoyed it, consider hitting that like and subscribe. And I'll see you guys on the next one.